and Syria, or Afghanistan and Israel, is a big obstacle called Iran. Now Iran's called for the end of Zionism, which was then portrayed in our media that the president of Iran called for Israel to be wiped off the face of the earth. This is bullshit. This is complete lies. Anybody still believing that Iran called for Israel to be wiped off the map in that precise way is fooled, is a sheep. They don't understand. They choose not to understand. There is no war being waged or called upon from Iran with Europeans, with us. Their problem's Zionism. And Europe's problem is Zionism. And America's problem is Zionism. So rather than looking at a regime or a government that simply is a threat to Israel and so we have to involve ourselves, maybe we should say to ourselves, maybe we should abandon our allied friendship with Israel. Maybe a Europe that isn't in cahoots with Israel is a safer Europe. Maybe a Europe that doesn't support this Zionist agenda is a safer Europe. You look at the IMF and our problems at the moment, especially in Greece. Greece has basically been sold to Zionism. Their landmarks, their history, their heritage is being sold. Every single thing around them is being sold. Ask yourself if Leonidas would have accepted Greece being sold to anybody. Greece being given away to any other culture or group of people. Leonidas would have gone to war with Israel. Ask yourself if we understand fully what's going on. Because once you start to see the real picture, you see clearly that the threat in the Middle East is, and has been since 1948, has been Israel. Now, a lot of people don't understand the ins and outs of what's going on there. And I understand that because it's complicated, to say the least. And I'm not saying for a minute that our relationship with Islam should be one of peace, because we can see clearly in Europe that Islam in Europe has no intentions of creating peace for us. But as I said in my last video, the only way we can change the immigration policy, or this policy of allowing this extremism into Europe, is by removing that Zionist influence that controls our immigration and our entire government process. It's not going to change so long as we stand side by side with Israel. Nothing will change. So what do we do? How do we go about demanding that Europe involves itself in no more wars for Israel? Because there's a lot of people out there that claim they support our troops, when in reality supporting the troops would surely be to not send them into harm's way in the first place. They don't need to go to these nations. We have nothing to gain and nothing to lose by just keeping ourselves out of this. We have nothing to lose. But by sending our troops in, which is one of the big problems. The other day I watched Question Time, and there was someone in the crowd and they were saying, oh, the bloodshed in Syria is terrible, we need to do something. Now I remember the war in Iraq, and we all know, everybody knows, that the war in Iraq was unjustified. Apparently Osama bin Laden, who was in Afghanistan, attacked the Twin Towers, and then the next thing we go after Saddam Hussein and Iraq. I even remember watching George Bush slip up in a news interview when he said, oh yeah, we're going to go and attack Afghanistan. He had the agenda all laid out in his mind. And anybody that studied 9/11 knows that it was opportunistic that America was attacked. It was a disgusting act of slaughter for an agenda. They're the only two buildings to have ever collapsed from fire, and buildings have burned for 24, 48 hours in Mexico, Venezuela, on 10 floors, 20 floors, 50 floors, and never collapsed. And of course we all know Building 7, which is the third building that collapsed in New York on that day. And Larry Silverstein turned around and said, oh well, the building was unstable and so we had a demolition team pull the building. So we're meant to believe that a demolition team was sent into New York while all this was happening. You'd think that these demolition men would want to lift up the rubble, clear some of the carnage and help in saving lives. Not that there was any chance of saving any lives under those millions or billions of tons of steel, broken, crushed, pulverised, thermite, melted steel. But Building 7 collapsed. Look into it, Building 7. But we all called for something to happen, or America called for something to happen, and the government knew that would happen. You can't take 3,000 lives and fill a nation with that kind of shock and anger and not expect in the beginning that nation to accept any war. You could have said, oh, Canada did it, and America would have been screaming for Canadian blood. But when people had a chance to wake up and open their eyes to what had happened, they realised that Iraq didn't have weapons of mass destruction, Saddam couldn't unleash nuclear bombs in 45 minutes, Saddam didn't have this gigantic anthrax factory. It was all bullshit, and you all fell for it. So you have a man on Question Time, what are we going to do? When are we going to go into Syria? Now after we invaded Iraq and we found out that it was the wrong thing to do, everybody said the war in Iraq was wrong. Then we went into Libya, people complained, oh it's wrong. So it doesn't make any sense to me. 1 minute we involve ourselves in conflict only for our people to say that we were wrong to do so. Then when you have a nation like Syria or Iran who hasn't antagonised Europe in any way whatsoever, we have people calling for us to go in and do something about it. So it's almost like a catch-22 situation. If we don't go in and help or liberate, if you can even use the fucking word liberate, I prefer to use the word annihilate. If we don't go in, people complain that we've left people to their own to be slaughtered. If we do go in, we're told that we went in unjustifiably and that we shouldn't have. So the answer really to those people screaming for us to involve ourselves in Syria, especially all these cowards, all these Arab cowards stood outside the London embassy with their Syrian flags or their Iranian flags. I have a message for those people. If you really care about your nation and you claim pride in your nation and you bleed Syria and you bleed Iran, get on a plane, go home, defend your nation and country and people with pride. Stop being a coward and hiding. So my own personal view, we should leave Syria well alone. We should leave Iran well alone. We should remove our dangerous friendship with Israel now, today, this very moment. We should abandon Israel's campaign of war in the Middle East. If we don't, then we're about to find ourselves in one giant shitstorm. Because as I said, this isn't Iraq, this isn't Libya, this isn't America going into Somalia or Sudan. Syria is a nation with about 350,000 well-disciplined troops, some of the best air defence in the world, most of it bought from Russia. And Iran is a nation that has so many contracts or deals, however you want to look at it, with Iran, and China has deals with Iran worth billions and billions, and China's openly said a war with Iran is a war that China will involve themselves in, and it's basically World War III. Now the Zionists want World War III, but the West, we can't afford World War III. America, just yesterday I saw a documentary regarding America and their health service, and it basically said that every 60 seconds an American is turned away from a hospital in an ambulance. It doesn't matter if they've got a gunshot, a stab wound, they're having a heart attack or what. So this major superpower that's involved in wars on every continent, basically every continent, cannot even care for its own, cannot even look after its sick or its elderly or its injured or the dying. Britain, as you know, is facing financial mess just as the rest of Europe. But our leaders seem so quick to jump on the next campaign of war in the Middle East. They don't care that we're poor. They don't care. It's as if Europe, to them, means nothing. It's as if World War II's already on the cards. The annihilation of Europe from the hordes of people we've invited in is already underway. They already know it's coming. They're prepared. They can run, they can go anywhere they like. They could jump on a plane, or, you know, David Cameron could get his emergency evacuation to anywhere in the world, while the rest of us are just left. While all these cells of terrorists that have come from all over the Middle East will just start detonating shit all over the country. Trains, buses, schools, halls, restaurants, pubs, clubs. So in many ways we manufacture our own terrorism. We create our own problems. And it all boils down to a support for a nation that claims to be our friend, when in reality, they're not your friend. Israel can admit openly, it can air a documentary with Israeli men standing in front of a camera admitting that they carried bombs into the King David Hotel and killed and maimed British men. They admit this on TV. They look into the camera like I'm looking at you, and they admit that they murdered British men. What does our government do? Do they extradite these people for trial? Of course not. We shake their hand. We do more deals with them. We have our leaders put on their skull cap, gather in the synagogue, and tell the Jews how we'll support them no matter what. No matter if our land gets destroyed, no matter if our economy collapses into the ground. David Cameron himself looked into the eyes of a bloodthirsty crowd of rabbis who claimed to them, I am a Zionist. Our own government, our own Prime Minister, telling the Jewish people that he himself is a Zionist. And I challenge people to go to their internet and find out just what Zionism is, just what the agenda of Zionism is. Because if you understand it, you will understand that we can go round and round in fucking circles all day long about immigration, about black culture, about gang culture in North London, or any of these issues. We are never going to solve them, ever, unless we change the policies. Or think of it this way, Europe is on a train, and the driver of that train is a fucking lunatic. He's driving straight for the edge of a cliff at full speed, and the whole of Europe is on that train. And we can think to ourselves that if we start throwing people off the train, we might somehow slow it down or save ourselves. When in reality, what we truly need to do is march up to the front of the train where the driver's sat, pull the driver out of the driver's seat, chuck the fucker off the train and put the brakes on. And if we don't put the brakes on, we're going to crash and burn.